And that's how it works. Hello, welcome to Waypoint Survival. Today, I want to show you how to make a hobo reflector oven. Stay tuned. In the classic era of the hobo, which we consider between 1870 and 1939, but we've been focusing mostly on the 1920s and the 1930s, we see a lot of different projects that they would make from scrap materials, cast-off things, especially a lot of projects made from tin cans. And this one is no different. A reflector oven has many benefits. Often when you cook in just a pot or a frying pan over a fire, whenever you're making any kind of bread, it tends to burn to the bottom of the pan, biscuit tin, or whatever you're using. But by making a reflector oven, it helps to elevate what you're cooking up above the level of the heat and the flames, kind of traps the heat as well as reflects it down so you get an even bake all the way around in front of a fire. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. In order to make this project, you're going to need just a few simple things. First of all, you're going to need a large number 10 can, and you don't want to open either end. You have to leave those ends intact. You're going to want a church key. That's this triangle part. You're going to need some sort of a sharp fixed blade, a pair of pliers, a piece of wire. This is just a section of old clothes hanger, but any kind of wire will work. You probably will want to have a pair of gloves for doing this project. Again, that's up to you. Now, because we're not using a can opener to open this can, we're going to use this church key side. The other is a bottle opener. And we put a triangular hole right here. And then I emptied out the contents. This was a green bean can. I emptied the contents out into some quart jars. Once we have the beans safely put away in the fridge, you want to go ahead and take your fixed blade and figure out where you want your first straight cut to be, and you want to take your fixed blade, place it here, holding it carefully, and then tap down. Once you get to where you've got an edge here, you can take your blade and you can leverage this, working your way along until you get about halfway through. Then you flip it around, again holding it carefully. Go with the other side, tap it down, and using the heavy-duty rim, leverage it across like that. And that's how you make your first cut. Now it's going to be full of beans. You've hopefully already drained all the fluid out of the triangular hole. I know it'd be easier to put 2 holes in, but I managed to do it with just 1. Then you do the same thing all the way around. You start on the edge. You figured where you want your lid to be, and you hold it steady, and you take the blade and you pop it in, leverage it a little bit, pop it in, leverage it a little bit, go all the way around. Do that to both sides, and then again across the back, which forms the full opening. Now on this, we only did about 1/3 of the can. You don't want to open it up too far. The idea is to trap some heat. Next, I took a nail and I poked a hole in each side. You can see that. It's just a 16-penny nail. And then, using a piece of our wire hanger, we just simply take and begin to roll this around to make a loop. It's actually quite easy to do. Just kind of progressively work your way around. And you want to make sure and leave that loop fairly well open so you can slip it through both holes. You cut it off. Once you slip it through both holes, take your pliers, grip it like this, and then you'll go ahead and close that loop. You can crimp that down just like so and continue to flatten and round that out until it gets over top of itself like that, and that way it won't open back up. Doesn't have to be perfectly round. All we're looking for is something that will hold the lid in place and allow it to flex. The way that I cut this, it ended up being a little jagged. Again, be careful of these edges. You can use a file. You can smooth that down if you wish. It's not terrible, but that actually worked out in my favor because when I open the lid, it's got a little bit of an area right there that wants to catch and hold that open for me. So it makes a pretty good reflector. If yours is made better than mine and it just wants to close, you can use a stick to prop that up or a piece of wire, anything that you wish. But this is what it should look like once you get that step accomplished. Before we go too much farther into the video, I want to remind you about our Waypoint Survival digital class. It's going to go live in just the next few days, and make sure you go down to the links in the description box below where you can sign up. Right now it's only $50 for the pre-purchase fee. Once it goes live, it will go up to $75. Now we need to put some sort of a rack inside to hold our biscuit tin or whatever we're cooking with. And there are different ways to do this. You could poke holes in the front and run some wire skewers all the way across, 4, 5, 6, whatever you want, to form a platform. What I did is I took just a piece of a stainless steel cooling rack, and if you can see, I put little bends on the end, and then I also put a couple of nail holes in the back. What this allows me to do is take this, come inside, find where those holes are, slide them in there. This goes all the way to the back and rests on the front. And now it's not going to come out. So that makes a pretty good little baker's rack. And what keeps it from sliding all the way through is these other wires are cut short enough to go up against the back of the can. All right, let's make some bread. Now this is my Bannock mix that I keep in this old Postum tin. And it's pre-mixed, and I'll make sure and put the recipe down below in the description box in case you're interested. But I like this Postum tin because it's airtight, and it's designed, of course, to keep your Postum nice and dry. But we've got our wonderful mixture already in here, and so we're just going to kind of estimate how much we want for dough. About a half a can, something like that, maybe a little bit more, and that should work pretty well. Next we add some clean water, and of course you want to add this kind of carefully. You don't want to overdo it, and we can always add some more mix, but we'd rather not waste it, again, if we're in the back country. Now you say, well, what if I end up with too much? Well, you can always make more. You can add more of the powder to it, but for this we're trying to get enough to fill a small baking tin. And you want to make sure that while this is well mixed up, you don't want it to be either too loose. You want it to be in a clump and hold together well. So again, add water as you see fit. Just don't add too much. Next we have a small aluminum bread tin, and we're going to take our mix. I'm going to put it in here. Now again, depending on what size of a container you have, you may need to go ahead and mix up some more. You want this to be at least level with the top of your tin. That would be best. Now, as I said before, you want to make sure that it's at least level with the top of your pan. It is going to rise some, because we use self-rising flour. Of course, always try to keep your hands clean when you're working with something like this. Either rinse them off in a creek or a stream, or at least wipe them dry. Then you need to build a good strong fire. And your fire needs to be tall. This fire is about this far off the ground. It's stacked up. There's a couple of stones under here, but I've got a good bed of coals. What we're looking for is a wall of heat. Again, we're not cooking, so we're not looking for heat from the bottom. We're baking. We need heat to come in from the front and fill the circle of that can. So opening the can, making sure that the grill is in there good, and making sure that this doesn't flop open. We want it to look just like that, because that's going to catch and reflect. And again, if you're having trouble with this, you might want to brace it with something, but we're going to put it right back here behind the fire, just like this. And you want to try to keep this level if you can. So you may have to use some stones, might have to use a stick or something to kind of level that up. But the other thing that you want to make sure you do is, if it's round like this can, make sure that you put some stones behind it. So you have to block that off so that it doesn't roll around on you. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Now this part you probably do want to have gloves for, because this gets exceedingly hot the more that you use this. I'm going to take our mini bread loaf pan. I'm going to place it just like this inside, and then we're going to rotate this around so that it reflects the heat down into our bread. Here's a side view of the fire and the reflector oven. So you might have a question as to how long this takes to bake. Well, depending on how big your loaf pan is and how much dough is in there, 15-20 minutes. Again, the heat of the fire, how established it is, ambient outside temperature, all of that stuff makes a difference. But basically, you just keep an eye on it, and you can see when it starts to turn brown on the outside. And the one thing you do have to do is you want to turn it around so that you make sure that the front and the back get even heat, and I'll show you that here in a minute. All right, I can see that the front edge of the bread right there is starting to turn brown, so that's a good sign. Now we need to just simply come in here and turn it around. Now you see I've turned the loaf sideways so that the top is facing the flame, and then we'll flip it over and put the bottom as well. That's going to make sure that we get it toasted all the way around really nice. So as you can see, we've got the bottom of the pan now turned sideways, and that's just going to make sure that it gets cooked all the way around. And I want to add something. Before you use these cans around a fire like this, always make sure you get a hot fire going and burn it out. You can tell that this one is kind of a dark burned color. It's not real bright and shiny. That's because it has a lacquer coating inside, which helps the food not touch the metal and cause rusting and gives it your long shelf life. But you do want to burn that out before you use it to cook or bake or anything like that, because you don't want all those lacquer fumes in with your food. All right, it's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and take it out of here. It's a little bit burnt on that side where the flames got really hot, you can see, but that's just the edges. I got a piece flaking off already. Let's take it over to our bench. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, I do need to tell you that you got to monitor this carefully. You can't just set this in front of the fire and walk off. You got to turn it, you got to be very careful, and do be prepared. If your fire's really hot like mine was, you're going to get a little bit of burntness around the outside edges there. So it's going to get a little crispy on you. So there's that piece right there. But if you've greased your pan really well, it should come right off. Look at that. A nice, tasty loaf of bread. All right, let's see how it tastes. Wow, that's really good. It's still a little doughy inside, which I personally really like, but it could have spent a little bit more time in front of the fire with the bottom turned up just like that, so that it could have heated a little more to the inside. But wow, that's a really good Bannock recipe, by the way. It's very tasty. All it needs is some butter and some jelly or some honey or something like that. It would be absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much for watching the video, and I hope that you enjoyed this little look into the past, into the classic era of the hobos, and how they made reflector ovens, using simple things like tin cans and wires, and just the simplest of things to effect their survival and to make their stay in the hobo jungle a little more comfortable, to cook for one another, and again, to try to mimic the comforts of home while they were away, looking for work, providing for their families, or just going from place to place, trying to keep body and soul together. This is James Bender for Waypoint Survival. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also make sure and check out the links in the description box below, just under the More button. While you're down there, you'll also find our waypointsurvival.com link. This is where you can sign up to take survival and bushcraft classes at our beautiful training facility here in Southern Ohio. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate it. And when you do subscribe, make sure and press that bell button so that you can stay notified of all of our upcoming videos, and we'll talk to you next time.